All right, thank you, everybody. It's exciting to be here, and like Justin said, I'm going to show you how we are using GIS to streamline freshwater pipeline planning at Coterra. A quick overview for how this talk's going to go. First, I will shed some light on why freshwater pipelines are important, and then I'll cover the history of their development at Coterra and explain how GIS has influenced that process. And then I will demonstrate some of the apps that we've developed and show how they support different aspects of waterline development. So first things first, why are we thinking about freshwater pipelines? The short answer is because they have significant cost savings and environmental benefits. As many of you know, the fracking process requires a lot of water. A well, on average, will take about 500,000 barrels of water to frack. And historically, that water has been brought to a pad via water hauling from trucks. And that's what the picture on the right there shows, is a pad. It's some drone imagery of a pad during fracking where water was brought by truck. And you can see all the trucks lined up at the top end of the pad. You can see trucks going around the center of activity. You can see trucks coming and going on the access road at the bottom of the pad. Water hauling has a lot of traffic. And those visits really add up. A single frac stage is about 100 trucks of water, and a well can vary a lot, but can have an average of about 50 frac stages. And typically at a pad visit, we're going to be fracking 4 to 8 wells at a time. So you can do the math on how many visits that ends up being. Water lines, of course, sidestep the need for all that trucking, and that has environmental benefits. It reduces our emissions impacts. It reduces adverse impacts on local roads. And overall, it's less annoying to landowners around our operations. And all of us in this room being energy professionals, we all know how important it is to be a good neighbor and to keep the landowners that we operate on happy. More on the cost saving side, water lines can deliver about 60% more water per day to pads than trucking can. And that faster water delivery translates to fewer days needed to frack. And that can have very significant savings because the rental rate for fracking equipment it's high. It's in the 6 figures per day. So every day saved is significant cost savings. And I mean, it can go into the millions of dollars for a single pad. So the history of how we began doing this at Coterra. Originally, a few years ago, we decided to try replacing water hauling at some of our pads with water delivery via pipeline at some pads scheduled to be fracked in that first calendar year. We initially outsourced these projects to third parties, and they handled everything from initial routing, right-of-way acquisition, permitting, construction, and eventually pulling up the line after the particular frack was complete. At this point, the involvement on the GIS side was pretty minimal. Everything was handled by the vendor, and they would send us occasional shapefiles or sometimes still KMZs showing what they were planning to build or what they had just built to get to the various pads we were fracking that year. And we would just put these in occasional maps, and we also set up a simple web app that showed this data alongside other company data like our proposed future well pads, so we could see where we might need to get to next. As we gained experience, we made the decision to take a more hands-on approach to waterline development by handling right-of-way acquisition and initial route development in-house and not using a third-party company for that, for the entirety of that piece. We wanted that control for a few reasons. And the first is that third parties weren't as incentivized as we were to design the most efficient route by, for example, as this picture shows, routing by other wells along the way from point A, that being the water withdrawal at the south end of the map, to point B, which in this case is pad number 5. In the example you see here, our planned route, this is like a simplified version, but our planned route is about half the distance of a proposed route we got from a third party. And that route's going to be cheaper to plan, build, and operate, and give us significant savings, all while also having the additional value of visiting extra well pads. One other reason we wanted to take things in-house is because we have prior relationships with a lot of the landowners in our operating area, and we're a known entity to them, and we felt we could be more effective and efficient at acquiring right-of-way than a third party. We know who's good to work with, who's not. We know how to make the most benefit from our time. And last but not least, when doing things in-house, we are better able to adapt to ongoing changes to the drill schedule. As we moved in-house, GIS became more involved, and we began providing line lists for proposed routes, a line list being a list of every parcel a route crosses, landowner exhibit maps, and then ongoing project progress summaries just showing how much progress we've made on a project in acquiring rights of way or getting permission to survey on proposed routes. And in doing this, it quickly became apparent that aggregating all the required data from all the contributors so we could have an up-to-date understanding of the whole project was going to be a challenge. So we'll jump into this next slide, and that will show you what we mean. We needed to understand where data was coming from and how it needed to be processed in order to work with it in GIS. And this diagram shows how data was initially being shared in the very early stages when we first moved to doing things in-house. There are 3 main parties that contribute information on waterline projects. You have land, environmental, and engineering. And initially, all were sending new information to project management and on no particular update schedule. So again, having that whole picture of what, a whole picture of the latest information was hard. We didn't have full confidence that what we were always aware of was like the latest and greatest from each of these parties. From a GIS perspective, as a second-hand recipient of this raw data, the lack of inconsistency in updates made it tough to streamline processes. And this wasn't just a challenge for us. Keeping all project participants apprised of whatever everybody else was doing was a never-ending job for project management. Taking information from this person and communicating it to this person over here. There's just emails flying back and forth, and it wasn't the best use of their time. So we took matters into our own hands, and we envisioned ways to improve data consumption that put GIS in the center of information flow. And we envisioned reducing the volume of one-off requests to us by displaying and summarizing data in ways that could automatically answer some of the most common questions people had. So some of the changes we made are on the land side. Lease negotiation progress had originally been tracked in separate Excel spreadsheets by each landman working on a project, and then aggregated by project management. So we moved to having that being entered directly in a GIS using Smart Editor on a parcel layer that had special fields added for lease negotiation or right-of-way acquisition like status, like permission to survey, verbal approval, and like whether the property had been acquired or not. On the environmental side, the consultant we use doesn't have an enterprise GIS system, and they prefer sending us shapefiles. So we've worked with them to have that shapefile delivery standardized. And then we built some model builder automations on our end that we can plug new deliveries into, and then those will quickly just append into our GIS environment. On the engineering side, we made a couple of improvements. On our first in-house projects that we took on, we were still using a third-party engineering firm to handle the route design from the get-go. And they would send us periodic shapefile deliveries of their CAD drawings to update in our GIS. So we changed to having them stream a web service to us. So they use the CAD to ArcGIS plugin to sync their CAD environment with their GIS, and then we could consume their service and quickly run updates based on that. It was just much, much easier and saved them a lot of trouble of exporting shapefiles. On more recent projects, we're not doing the full CAD design as early, and we're using editable layers in one of our web apps to communicate reroutes and the locations of access roads and other facilities adjacent to the waterline routes. And integrating all this data into GIS has had other advantages too. The big one being that we have other really useful data in GIS already, such as like current 2024 imagery. And having the ability to see all this project data aside, current imagery, hillshade data, has improved our confidence to handle those initial routing phases completely in-house. So with that, I'm going to get into some demos here, and I've had to blur some things out just to, maintain, I guess, confidentiality. So what you're seeing here is our freshwater pipeline dashboard. And as I remember, one of the requests that we got early on was these project progress summaries. And like a big question was always like, how many feet of this line do we have permission to survey? Or how many feet of this line have we gotten verbal approval on? And those were very tedious for me to do. So I was like, let's just make a dashboard and you just go there and see. And these won't be a one-off request for me anymore. So to give you a quick orientation, okay, cool. To give you a quick orientation of what's on this dashboard, at the top here are buttons for each active waterline project. And when you click one of those buttons, all the metrics will filter down to that project in these two areas here. Over here we have a list of the active routes, and you can click one of these routes and it'll zoom to that area on the map. Right in here, these are all like high-level project metrics. So project level metrics on a footage basis. So like I said before, it's telling you how many feet of a project have achieved a certain status on right-of-way acquisition, like permission to survey or verbal approval. And then for a more granular look, we have this pie chart, which right now is a circle because we have permission to survey everywhere. We have this pie chart and then a list of each parcel on a given project route. And that'll tell you parcel by parcel. What is the status of that parcel for permission to survey? And then there's several stacked things we look at here. We have survey permission, we have right-of-way acquisition, verbal route approval, all stacked up. So we use this dashboard every week as a starting point in like weekly route development meetings. And I'll go ahead and play the video here and explain how this is used. So the first thing we do is we just pick one project. In this case, this red line here. We'll zoom to it and we'll check those high-level metrics. In this case, this project is mostly acquired. But you see we have 9.5% still pending. So we can arrow over here and see that's four parcels that are pending. And then we'll typically zoom to each one, and the land agents for this project can speak to how the negotiations are going and whether we need to think about a reroute or make any changes. So we would make any reroutes we need to, and then we'll move to a different project. In this case, it's already a pretty newsworthy problem. We have a right-of-way option that was denied on one property. So of course we would talk about this and say, what did you learn from the landowner? Do we know why this person turned us down? And they might say they want to work with us, but they don't like the current route. They want it to be moved out of the middle of their field, for instance. So we can turn off the parcel coloring, turn on some imagery, look at our options, and discuss. So the next natural step from that meeting conversation is to send an engineer to the field to walk the property to look for potential reroute options or to review any that were identified in the previous meeting. And to do this, they would use a quick capture app that we created specifically for conducting preliminary field walks on proposed waterline routes. And I'll play the video here. So you can see our midstream engineer walking up to record the location of this buried gas line marker. And this is something that we want to take note of. All these water lines are overland lines, so they can go over pretty easily buried line rights of way, but we still need to record the locations of them and coordinate with whoever owns the right of way before we build on them. And this here you can see the interface for the quick capture app, pretty simple, pretty easy to make. Took me about a day to make, and it's been really, really impactful on this project. So like the effort to impact ratio on this product has been really good. One thing I want to draw your attention to is this top button here. People love having the ability to stream where they're walking and then shoot in points while they're doing it, just using the buttons. That walking line can often be the basis for a reroute because people will try and follow a desktop, created route and find that it doesn't work so well. And then they'll just walk something different that works better. Maybe it's not as hard of a slope, or maybe there's, a wetland in the way that they can already tell without getting a biologist out there. So they'll walk the appropriate route, and then that can be the basis for a reroute. And it also just gives us in the office pretty unambiguous clarity on what was looked at and what wasn't looked at in the field. And after a land field walk is completed, landmen from the office can review those observations, in this case the buried gas line marker. And with that information in mind, they can go and use Smart Editor and draw a proposed route. And we have up here coming up, we have some required attributes to fill out just to keep the data consistent and clean and complete. And as soon as this is saved, everybody else can see it and discuss it. So there's, a lot of ability to come into meetings having already thought about, possible improvements or changes and not just be confronted with new information during a meeting. So let's suppose that a landowner exhibit map was created using the reroute we drew in the previous demo, and that the landowner signs a revised option agreement with the new route. This is what a landman would do after acquiring a right-of-way option on a parcel. So we're beginning here on the dashboard. You can see this is denied. We'll jump to our web app here. And then from the pop-up, you can access Smart Editor and change the appropriate status here. That property is now acquired. People love the instant feedback between these two apps. So you've seen 3 apps today. You've seen our dashboard, which summarizes lease negotiation progress and identifies outstanding action items. You've seen the quick capture app we've made, which allows field personnel to quickly record relevant observations and communicate that back to office personnel. And you've seen our progress tracker web app, where updates in lease negotiation status and reroutes can be entered directly into GIS and immediately viewable to all project participants. And what's the impact of all these tools? My answer to that question is speed. We can evaluate new data and respond to it faster. And this graphic here shows the cyclical nature of working on waterline projects. We make the best guess we can in a route from the outset, and then we get new information, and then we make changes. And we're continually getting new information and making new changes in sort of an iterative cycle until we arrive at a route that satisfies all of our requirements. And the key to expediting that information flow for us has been putting GIS in the center of that information flow, where all this data can either be directly entered into GIS or just immediately appended there and visible to everybody. Many apps that we build offer more convenient ways of accessing information. The apps you've seen here offer that, but they also make it easier to take in new information. And to get to these, where we currently are in these apps, it's been a lot of slow incremental improvements. And if I gave this talk in 6 months, there'd probably be more things to say, because I'm sure there will be more things that come up and other changes that get made. But the efficiencies that we've gained so far, for now, will be there from the start on any new waterline projects that we take on. And there's, plans. And these gains ultimately benefit our bottom line by simplifying the overall planning process and reducing the days it takes to get to a permit-ready product. So that's my talk. And if you have any questions, happy to answer them.
All the examples I missed the first couple slides.
Sure.
All the examples you showed were up here in Appalachia. Is your Permian unit using this also?
No. At this point, no.
Is it just they want it perfected, or there's no need for it in the Permian?
They do midstream planning in the Permian. The requirements are so different down there that a lot of what I've built for Marcellus wouldn't even apply.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so for instance, we'll cross on a given project, 20 to 30 parcels on one project route here.
Oh, yeah.
Down in the Permian, they might have to cross 2. So the whole tracking lease, and in that case too, what they've done is they've just made consent decrees. That may be the wrong term. They've just made prior arrangements with those landowners to where they're free to build what they need to build, and they just pay the landowner for it. And there's not this like whole presenting them this route and getting their approval on it. They've got like prior approval, because a lot of people down there, they're in the landowners are in the oil and gas business. Like they just are comfortable with people building on their property. Up here, it's not the case. I mean, people have farms and other things that they want to protect, and we're trying to work with people to protect their interests.
It's a whole other world in
It's
Texas.
totally different. Yeah. The PM, he came from Texas, and he just said, you wouldn't believe how different it is between the terrain, the number of landowners, the timelines for permitting. It's very, very different. Yeah. For you?
Yeah, I was wanting to know more about the survey permission footage. Are you pulling that from a polyline that's intersected by all the parcels, or is that an attribute from the parcel data?
So you're talking about like, how am I getting these numbers here? So whenever I do a centerline update, I'm also doing an intersect on the parcels and tagging the segment length in that, from that line on that parcel to the parcel. So like the route update of the line also kicks off a parcel update to get the footage. And then it's all driven by statuses on the parcel. Each parcel has a footage, and then we're just summing up, how many feet have survey permission. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
And that's all model builder driven. In the back? The details widget?
Yeah, which dashboard widget are you using to have the display like that?
That's an indicator.
Oh, indicator.
Yep. Yeah, so I've queried down. So I'll filter down to a project using these buttons here. And then from there, I'm just saying, give me the sum of all parcels with this project name that have survey permission. Sum up the footage based on this other field for permission to survey. So I should mention too, each parcel that you see here is tagged not just with the footage of the line, but with the project name. That way it knows what to tally up.
We considered putting budgeting information with this. We did something similar at St. X where we actually had the budgets attached to each parcel, so they knew how much money they were spending on each parcel for each route. And then they had an idea of how much that entire project would cost if they were under or if they were over.
I have not. When I made the schema for the parcels, that was a field that was added, but that hasn't been one that people have kept up with on updating. And that's not been something that people have approached me and asked for either. But it makes sense. Sure. Anyone else? All right. Thank you.